Good morning, George.
Hey, good morning, Ethan. How are you today?
I'm outstanding. Welcome, everyone,
Good, man.
to Coffee with George and Phil. On the first and third Saturday of every month, we show up to help you get from where you are to where you want to be, whether that's personally or professionally. Maybe you're in a job transition. Maybe you're looking to pivot your career or engage the team at the job you already have. Either way, we're your hosts, George Murray and Ethan Connor. I'm filling in for Phil during his absence. We're glad you can meet us early this Saturday morning. We do encourage questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as time allows us.
Hey, so we want to thank our viewers who are getting up so early if they're watching this on live, LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, or YouTube Live. If you're watching this on a pre-recorded for the YouTube Live or also on one of our podcasts, just hit the subscribe button and you'll get notified for upcoming shows.
Mental health encompasses emotional, psychological, and social well-being. A recent Harvard Business Review stated that in 2020, mental health support went from being nice to have to being a true business imperative. Fast forward to 2021, and the stakes have been raised even higher thanks to a greater awareness of the workplace factors that can contribute to poor mental health, as well as heightened urgency around its intersections with DEI. What are business leaders to do? Well, before we start, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Global HR Research. They are better by every measure, as highlighted by their three pillars: better data, better technology, and better teams. They're 100% US-based, and their team is committed to customer excellence.
And one of the things that we want to reiterate is that, especially with the challenges at our business, global human resource research can also help you with your whole onboarding process. So thank you, GHRR, for supporting us.
Now, George, tell me a little bit about this Second Share podcast that you're working on, and maybe about your new book too.
Yeah, well, as you know, I'm connected to a few folks, and what I looked at when I was writing my book, I realized how many connections I had with other chief operating officers, and just kind of came up with hey, what if we talk about maybe just two topics for each chief operating officer and go deep into those questions. So this podcast is not live, it's not videoed, it's streaming straight off of podcast platforms like Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, and Apple. In the most recent one, which was the first, we had Tom Pettit, who was the chief operating officer of Generac Power Systems. They've gone through some tremendous growth through the last couple of years in the post-pandemic. We talked about leadership, what companies are looking for in leaders, as well as what employees are looking for in those leaders. And then we also talked about topics like quiet quitting. And so really excited. Next week, we have Chris West of Winnebago. We'll be talking about some hot topics there as well. And you can check out one of those podcast platforms for the shows. And the book, the book is actually doing a lot better than the first one it did. Getting calls and questions as far as multiple book sales, as well as speaking on the topics, whether it's helping ignite their workforce, maybe re-engaging their team because they're coming back to the work office, but most importantly, helping companies and business owners on retaining their talent.
All right, well, let's get into our main topic today. We'd like to welcome to the show Elizabeth Fleming. She's a doctor of psychology and a business psychologist at Ascend Thailand Strategies. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm excited to be here with both of you and with all the listeners, of course.
Yeah. So let me see here. I'm a little bit off here this morning. That's not unusual.
It's a normal thing.
Yeah, maybe I'm feeling some mental stress. Maybe I need some help here. Yeah.
But
Elizabeth, so given the past few years where we've seen in the workforce as it relates to mental health, and what should leaders look out for right now to make sure that they can turn around, hopefully reduce the stress and all the other issues that we're talking about with quiet quitting and quiet firing and everything, we can go on and on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I think it's normalizing that mental health exists. We all have mental health. And I hope that if anyone leaves this podcast with anything, it's knowing that it exists on a spectrum. It just is really the level to which it is impacting, our daily life. And I think, given these past few years, we've begun to see it in a different light. We've normalized it. People feel more comfortable talking about mental health, and therefore it appears that there's been increases. I think leaders really just need to look out for their people. They need to kind of be with them when they are struggling. When the kids are running in the background or the dog is barking. Just normalizing that. Hey, yeah, that causes anxiety for people, even if it doesn't for the people across the camera.
So how is COVID and sort of the pandemic and all the different changes to our work, our professional lives, how has that contributed to the mental health and some of the mental health issues that you deal with when you're working?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think this is a complex issue. We've all been through this really incredibly challenging time. For those of us who are more extroverted, it's been hard. We've been at home. We've been stuck in this place, really not able to connect as we're used to. But I will say that I think it's complex because it's really caused each of us to look inside and admit that there is some struggle happening. So I can tell you that I'm somebody who deals with what I like to call high functioning anxiety. I'm guessing there's some listeners on here who maybe know what I'm talking about. The experience of anxiety that I felt in the office is a lot different than it is today. Again, I'm worried about my kids being in the background. I'm worried about, well, gosh, there was a long pause on that call. What are they thinking about me? Do they agree? Do they not? And rather than being able to walk across the hall and just simply ask that question, I have to be really intentional about reaching out to people. And I think that for me, that's what I've been seeing is people struggling to figure out that balance of intentionality and how do I show up for the people around me?
Hey, Elizabeth, you do a lot of consulting and coaching with executives and business owners now.
Yeah.
What are you looking as far as helping them prepare to cope with increased mental issues, and about the leaders themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen leaders actually have those, and how are they adjusting?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that in a lot of ways, leaders maybe were definitely impacted in a different way. But again, going back to that kind of high functioning anxiety, it for a lot of people, it's very helpful. So you're able to get things done. You're more productive. And because things had to shift so rapidly, it all of a sudden caused, well, what do I do now? I'm used to the status quo. I'm used to what we were doing, but what comes next? And so, so I do think that, it really goes beyond, asking someone how you're doing today. I think that question is incredibly helpful, to say, hey, George, how are you doing today? But it's awfully open-ended and it kind of leaves the other person wondering, well, how honest should I really be? Is this the end of my career? Is this the end of my job? So being more intentional and showing that you care, and saying, hey, I've struggled in the past too. And I've noticed that you seem really overwhelmed when you're working on your project. What's been going on? What's changed? That's a much better way of getting that information out. And then being able to, as a leader, adjust based on what their response is. So it's really about flexibility.
So we mentioned it kind of in our introduction, this article from Harvard Business Review, and I want to refer back to it again. We said that earlier, more employees are leaving their jobs for mental health reasons. 68% of millennials, 81% of Gen Z. So how important is it for a company that they, how important is company culture, and what can leaders and businesses do starting on this Monday to work on that and to make essentially their company a better environment for people with mental health issues?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, company culture, I believe is one of the biggest factors in what happens next. Right. So, someone comes and says, hey, I'm really struggling with this thing. I'm feeling really down. What happens next? If they fear that it is, again, the end of their job or the end of their career, they're not going to say anything. Why would you? I don't think any of us would. Right. But if we can create a psychologically safe space for people to share what's happening for them in their day-to-day, by, again, caring about each other at all levels. I know I've worked with organizations where it's not abnormal for a direct report to say, hey, boss, something seems to be going on. What's going on? What's happening? And being able to have those relationships, we create this place where we can give feedback to one another directly. I've noticed your productivity is dragging a little bit. Let's talk about what's going on. But really the important key step for businesses and leaders to do is to be with the person in that moment. Don't just call it out and say, hey, things are really, you're having a really hard time, or, I'm not noticing that your numbers are as high as they could be, but be with them in that moment. How can I help you? What is it that you need today? Is it that you need to go to a 4-day work week? There's a lot of research out there that 4-day work weeks are better for productivity. I know it's not our usual. We're used to working a 5-day work week, 9 to 5 or 8 to 5. But if we're, but 4-day work weeks really prioritize wellness, right? It's baked into your schedule. You don't have to ask if you're having a tough day.
That goes right into my next question as we kind of tear off that last response. Is there's a well-known snippet out there from Simon Sinek. He said, there's two different types. There's this manager that goes in and says your numbers are down. Right. And if your numbers don't get up, then we're going to have to look at something different, right? As opposed to the leader goes in and says, hey, your numbers are down. Are you okay? Right. And so my question is, to that point, what are some of the signs that leaders or business owners are maybe overlooking or should be looking for when they see these issues? And then more importantly, what should they do?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think there's the ones that we all probably know about, again, changes in productivity or numbers and all of that, but it goes so much beyond that. I can say that, I've worked with companies or with candidates or I guess just people who work at the companies that I work with, who they say, gosh, this person just used to be really social and wanting to be with people, and they're just pulling back. They're not really doing the same things. So I think that's definitely something to look out for, kind of changes in behavior. If there's someone who's, pretty known for speaking up and giving their opinion, but all of a sudden they're not, that's a pretty good indication that something's happening, whether it's mental health or not. It's something to explore. And I think too, that if you're noticing, and this, I will be honest, this can be hard to identify, but, are they eating? Are they sleeping? Do they show up, not looking nice like they normally would? Those are indications that something might be going on, and it doesn't hurt to ask, but being careful not to shame in the process.
Oh, good
yes,
point.
kind of going off. Oh, sorry. Kind of going off of that, Elizabeth, what are some resources that employers can provide to, you mentioned company culture being very important. What are some resources that can really help it be a better environment for employees?
Absolutely. I think a lot of companies out there, especially larger mid-sized companies, have employee assistance programs available. I don't know that it's a resource that's always talked about. I've onboarded in some pretty large companies, and we haven't always talked about it. But knowing that is an option, it is confidential. And for those who don't know what EAP is, it's really about being able to so here's the thing. My kid is in the room. Apologies. Now I'm feeling anxious.
Oh, you're fine. How are you doing? Can we ask him a question about stress?
I mean, he probably would be able to answer it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the, flexibility. But no, so employee assistance programs are out there. They're confidential. It's being able to speak with a therapist or someone who's licensed. But again, that information does not go back to the company. And so that is definitely one resource that's out there. I will say that I've worked for places that create very strict boundaries around time. So they, and I talked to a lot of my clients about this too. Is it possible to say, hey, we can only schedule meetings between 9 and noon, and then again from 1 to 3. So 12 to 1, you are, it is lunchtime, it is go to the gym, whatever it is that you need to do. And so being able to help create those boundaries can be incredibly helpful, because sometimes it's hard for us to create them for ourselves.
Spaghetti's still on my arm.
I'm so sorry.
This reminds me of when we were just talking about where the little kid comes in on the interview of the individual that's begun to go all the way across all the social media platforms, and the mom's trying to drag the kids out of the room.
Maybe we'll go viral. We never know, right? Oh
hey, that would be great, right? Hey, so one of the things I want to know is, as a leader, if I'm feeling mental issues or health issues, what should I do? Right? Because again, the leaders got to not only keep the energy of themselves, but they got to be a coach and energy for their teams.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of those same resources are available to leaders, whether it's an EAP program, leaders have leaders. If they are the top of the chain, so to speak, they have mentors, right? They have people that they can talk to. And I think that those pieces are incredibly important. And again, I think it's a lot about just normalizing that mental health exists, and really just being able to get out there and seek help. If it is something that you think, I don't think I can do this on my own, talk to a doctor, talk to a psychologist or a therapist, and get out there. There's people out there wanting to help. And if that doesn't feel right for you, that's okay too. It's really just being able to kind of look inside and figure out what it is that you want, but also, of course, just knowing that together it gets better, so if we can be together, through those issues, they're going to have a much better experience. So.
All right. Well, just to conclude, Elizabeth, is there anything that we didn't ask about today that you think our viewers should know, or anything you'd like to share that isn't really related to any of our questions? Or maybe it is, if you've got a question you want to revisit and go add something to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I was, George and I were talking before the show a little bit about this topic, and also about this idea of alignment, and I think that is a piece that I'd like to throw in, because I think what we've seen is it's absolutely related to mental health, but it's also that people are, after this pandemic, they were challenged to look at things in a way that they never have had to before, right? And because of that, I think that we are seeking to understand, what do we value, right? And based on what we value, what do we do next? I can say for myself that this was a change in career for me. I was a clinical psychologist working as a therapist with individual clients and families. And I looked deep inside and said, what do I value? What is important to me, and what impact do I want to make? And so I will say that I think that is a piece that I would encourage people to take a look at, and don't be afraid to take those risks, because the payoff can be pretty profound. Even if it's not, it may mean, a step sideways, maybe down, but at the same time, what if you felt better in your personal life, in your family life, and in your professional life? So.
Hey, Elizabeth, we have one question from Layla Erickson. She says, how do you handle customers with mental health issues?
Yes. Oh, goodness. That is a great question. Honestly, I respond with very similar techniques, asking, how are you doing? How's it going? If there are concerns, if there are concerns that they're not able to do their job, and my role is to provide that information to the company, I would never say to somebody, gosh, I think this person just is really anxious and can't do the job, but I would talk about it in a different way. This would be some things to look out for. These are some things that you might want to do, some supports to put in place to help this person be successful, and really talking about it in that way versus blaming mental health, if that answers the question. I hope.
No, thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you. As we said, the show goes fast, but coming on the show and talking to our listeners about a really relevant topic right now. I mean, it seems like every other day, if not every day, there are mental health discussions going on in podcasts, et cetera. I mean, probably could talk about another couple hours, but we will make sure that we give people your contact information. If business owners and leaders are struggling in any type of career challenge and change or shift, they can reach out to Elizabeth.
Please do. Yeah. Thank you so much again for having me. This was a really great morning, and thanks for letting my son Cade join as well.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Maybe we'll be viral. We never know, right? Let's see. Let's try to make it viral.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Wow. We want to first thank Elizabeth for joining our show. Elizabeth is now in a new role. I think this is actually her first week in the new role that's helping businesses as well as leaders. And she was just out in Oregon for the whole week, helping businesses and kicking off mental health. And so you want to know more, you can reach out to Elizabeth both either on the email or the LinkedIn profile. I highly suggest it if you need any support in your business today.
All right, our next show here is going to be on November 5th. We're going to talk about career pivots and the question of, am I too old for a career pivot? So please join us then. Until then, we want to wish our viewers a great weekend and week ahead, and remember to achieve forward.
Get better.